Hi everyone, and welcome to the latest CTO Craft Bytes. Today we'll look at roadmaps and OKRs don't have to suck. If this is your first time at CTO Craft Bytes, let me tell you a little bit more about this group. CTO Craft is a mentoring and coaching community for technology leaders around the world, focusing on supporting technologists in their leadership growth. Community members are over 7,000, and CTO Craft provides them with one-on-one coaching, mentoring groups, a curated Slack community, and events like this one. And a huge thanks to our headline partner, AWS, for making these Bytes events possible. I'm Glenn Roberts. I'm moderating today's session, and I'm the CTO of Digital Solutions at iTech Art. Joining me with me today is Janna Bastow, CEO and co-founder at ProdPad. Welcome, Janna. Please tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. Hi, I'm Janna. You might know me as one of the founders of Mind the Product, which is a big community of product people. You also might know me as one of the founders and the CEO of ProdPad, which is a product management platform. We build software to help you build your roadmaps and collect ideas and talk to your customers and help figure out what you should actually build, and so that you don't end up building the wrong things. I have the privilege to talk to literally thousands of product people and figure out, how they're doing their OKRs, how they're doing their roadmaps, and from that, I've understood and gotten a chance to understand how a lot of people have done roadmaps really well, and of course, done roadmaps really badly. So, really glad to be here today and to share some of those lessons with you today. Thanks for having me today.
Yeah, well, thanks for being here with your experience. It just sounds very relevant to today's conversation. And our second speaker is Janna Chandra. Janna Chandra, if I say that correctly, who's the CTO and co-founder at Unitech AI. So welcome. Thank you for being here. Could you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, hi. Hi, everyone. I'm Danya, and I'm the CTO and co-founder at Unitech. We are a no-code SaaS company. I have a master's in data science from UCC Cork, Ireland, and I'm originally from India, where I was working as a software developer and in automation space for a number of years. And I've done my bachelor's in electronics and communication. So absolutely no product management kind of experience previously at all. But in my current CTO role, we've obviously worked without OKRs and roadmaps, and we are now working with OKRs and roadmaps. So I do have a lot of recent experience of implementing these technologies.
Excellent. Well, thank you for being here as well. For the audience, feel free to ask your questions at any time from the Ask a Question option. That's just below the video link. If you can do it in there, please, instead of the main chat, it makes it a lot easier for me to keep track. And yeah, let's kick off and start talking about roadmaps and OKRs don't have to suck. So for Janna, what is a good roadmap or OKR in your view?
So what makes up a good roadmap? Well, generally speaking, think about your roadmap not as a planning document, but more as a strategic communication document. A lot of people mess up the roadmap because they're trying to have it be this tell-all of everything that you're going to build and when, and really think about it more as something that allows you to take a step back and say, well, here's the steps we need to take to fulfill our strategy, to fulfill our vision. Really, it's there to give alignment and to provide room for autonomy. And you do that by being more problem or objective focused as opposed to being feature or solution focused. So if your roadmap is more of a list of things to do and when, it ends up not giving that autonomy and isn't a particularly good roadmap. Whereas if it's much more focused on, well, which problems do we need to solve and why, that problem objective focused, then it tends to be a much better roadmap because it gives that room for alignment and autonomy. And when it comes to OKRs, so probably worth talking about what an OKR is. That means objectives and key results. And an objective is really what you need to achieve. It's what success looks like for your company. And generally, these are high-level qualitative measures, right? So it might be something like improving revenue or increasing revenue or improving usability for a particular product or something like that. And then the key results are the qualitative, specific, measurable measures of progress that you might track. And you generally have these as a time-bound type thing. So they're generally your SMART goals, if you've heard that acronym. And so these key results are tied to these objectives. And where OKRs and roadmaps interplay is that generally a good roadmap should work with your OKRs, right? So you have your objectives and your key results, what you need to achieve and how you're measuring progress, but you also need initiatives, as in the actions you're going to take to get there. And those initiatives are what live on your roadmap, right? They're the problems that you're going to solve in order to hit those objectives and to help show that progress. So you need OKRs and you need roadmaps, and they're two separate things, but they should coexist.
Okay, great. And you did touch upon improving organizational alignment there. So, Danya, how do you actually do this with roadmaps and OKRs?
Yeah, so being transparent on the roadmap allows teams to make good decisions and contribute to design decisions by considering like future. At the beginning of a project, if we get everyone involved in the project on a call and explain what we're trying to achieve, then we explain what's being done by which team, how it impacts the real world, what is a version one. Like it's going to be on the roadmap, but visually explaining that, and then why something has to be completed a certain way, by what time, and how it would affect version 2 of the products to be done differently. We do these internally, and it can be a very overwhelming in the beginning, but then as we call out successes, as we hit milestones, that creates motivation, a sense of excitement, and it brings everyone on board with the roadmap, and that's crucial, I'd say. For OKRs, like I've managed the team with and without OKRs before, it does take a while for us to be clear, especially in a SaaS startup kind of environment with things changing every day, to become clear about our own objective and find what are those key metrics that we want to measure our performance against. But then having this written down and sharing this information with the team, with everyone, removes friction with between how different teams would operate. If all teams are pursuing their own self-interest, and communication and decision making of one team could hurt the other. Say one of our objective is to onboard X customers by end of the year. One of the key result would be we should be processing X times more data seamlessly, just as an example. Then the back end, front end, infrastructure teams should all be working towards this goal together, and how all of the deadlines are intertwined, and there is a better sense of shared responsibility to make this happen. And also, if you have remote teams and someone's joined in a different country and has become a part of your team now, with a clearly set objective and key result, they know and understand what's going on, and it takes less time to understand what this company is about, what they should be working on, and how they should be working with others. And it also just creates a sense of we are one team working towards same thing, despite the location and the role that is attached to someone in a team.
Yeah, Danya, you're right on. I mean, it's that visibility that you're giving people before you dive into actually building something. Whether it's just before the project begins, or sometimes months and months before things begin. You're giving things air before it becomes a problem that you start diving in and solving. It's one of the reasons why I call the roadmap a prototype for your strategy. Like when you kick off a new project, you don't take the first idea from your head and just say, okay, developers, go build this, because almost certainly it's going to be a junk idea, right? What you do is you take that and you scrap it down on a piece of paper, and you call that a prototype, and you show it to some team members or some stakeholders, some customers, and they give you feedback on it. It's a prototype, and it's junk, and they give you feedback on it, and you rip it up and you get new versions of it. Well, your roadmap is meant to be an imperfect version, and what you're actually doing is you're sharing it with your team so that they can give you feedback on it. So if you're taking your roadmap and you're saying, here's where I think we should go, I want to get your alignment, I want to get your feedback on it, so we can all be aligned and that we've all had feedback on this, so that we all agree that this is the direction we should be going together. So it's not just you as a product person, or you as the CTO or CPO or CEO coming down and saying, this is the direction, just listen to me because I've made this up in my head. This is what I've just drawn, go build. This is what I've thought of as the strategy, go make. happen. You're actually saying, let's align on this and let's get feedback on it. And if it's not the right thing, let's change the roadmap. Let's change this prototype and make it better. And over time, your strategy gets stronger and stronger with each iteration, each time you show it to somebody. And so your roadmap should be a tool that increases alignment and increases the strength of the strategy overall.
Yeah, it also unleashes creativity a lot because everyone wants to do well at it. So if we have said this is what we're going to do beforehand, like even before we start, there's going to be at least 2-3 new ideas on, but this could be done this way, or like I've seen this work this way in a different country with a similar product. Yeah, so that's just
yeah.
yeah.
That's such a
that
good
sense of excitement builds.
Yeah, and it's such a good point, using that creativity, because if you think about what an organization is a group of knowledge workers, right? And the old way of managing is just basically having top management and middle management and a whole bunch of people who just do what they're told, right? And the failing point is this middle management and top management who just sort of point in the direction, and you lose all the creative brains of these knowledge workers who have knowledge, right? If you're not using their knowledge, what are you using them for? What, just coding and doing what they're told, right? What you should be doing is saying, hey, here's a bunch of problems we know exist. How would you break this down? And if you start telling them, here are some problems, how would you break this down? They start coming back saying, well, in my old company, I saw it done this way, or in my country, I saw it done this way, or in this other thing I saw in this tangential area, I saw it done this way. You're going to find thousands of different ways of breaking down problems, and you're going to outperform your competitors by using the collective knowledge of all the people in your business. This is why companies who are autonomous, who allow their teams to collectively solve problems, outperform teams who have this top-down, point in the direction sort of way of working. It's by allowing the teams to use their creativity, as you say.
Excellent. Yeah. And as you mentioned, with the diversity, that obviously gives you extra strength when you are having those conversations. And I hate to say it, when I've been in smaller startups, I have been a bit more dictatorial of saying, this is how we're going to do it. But this is when there's normally like only a couple of juniors sitting inside a small startup where the drive does come from the top. But I completely agree. When you're larger than that, absolutely, you do want that collaboration amongst all the team there, which is very valuable.
Well, we still recognize ourselves as startup, but then at the start, I mean, not two people, but yeah, like it could still be, say, for example, especially in a startup, there is like, since you're still very close, like Janna rightly pointed out, when we do outperform our one of the competitor on this roadmap, and when you're calling that out, it again builds more of a sense of a team and part of the mission of the same boat. So we're like, here's what we said we'll do, here's what we did, and we did do better than others. Like that just like that helps keep people together again with remote teams, like and especially in technology, there's so much opportunities, like good workers could go work anywhere. So it helps build that sense of we are one team and we're working towards this one thing, and this means something to me. Kind of.
Yeah, you're right. It creates a competitive advantage as well. I mean, it's a tough world as a company trying to hire and retain people in your team. And so being able to say, hey, you know what, you're not going to be crushed by these demands of, being told what to do. You're actually going to be given the chance to work more creatively. You're going to be given the chance to flex your creative muscles and find interesting problems to solve, and given space to do so. That really counts for something as well. And it's not just about saying you're going to do that, it's showing you're going to be able to do that. And it has to show through in everything you do, from the way that you set up your OKRs and live them and breathe them, the way that you set up your roadmap and get feedback on it, your day-to-day work and progress, the way that you kick off projects and finish them off, the way that you do retros. It all comes through, and all this stuff really, really helps both give you a competitive advantage, as well as helps you retain and keep the most creative and intelligent people who are going to help you keep that competitive advantage.
Excellent. Well, we've got the questions coming in thick and fast from the audience. We're going to give it another 5 minutes before we start tackling them. We've already got 11 questions in there, which is fantastic.
Amazing.
One of the previous conversations we had, Janna, was you mentioned that a company's roadmap tells you a lot about that company's culture. Could you extend on that a little bit?
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess you could say literally thousands of roadmaps now. And I've started to notice a trend that I can look at somebody's roadmap and basically tell you what is wrong with the company. It's like a diagnostic tool. So you can often look at a company's roadmap and see if they are not providing that autonomy, if they're not providing enough alignment. Things like if it's very feature focused, if the roadmap is just a list of features, well, then it's a clue that they're not giving that autonomy to people. Right? If it's a list of things that their product manager or the product manager's boss has just said, go build this, then this, then this. Well, where's the autonomy in that? How are they ever going to go work on that? Right? If everything's lined up, like this is the finish date, here's the next start date, here's the finish date, here's the next start date. Well, where's the room for learning and retros and failure? Right? You need to build that in. Is there any psychological safety within that company? You often start scratching beneath the surface and you find out that there isn't. You can often start diagnosing deeper cultural issues just by looking at the top level of a roadmap. Oftentimes you'll see a roadmap and all it is a bunch of features, and they're not tied back to objectives. There's no why behind them. And you look at it saying, well, why are you working on this? Well, we need a new feature. And why are you working on this? We need that new feature. But they haven't actually articulated why. And at the end of the day, you should be able to say, what have you actually achieved? And if all you can say is we've achieved a bunch of new features, you should be able to question and say, well, does a bunch of new features necessarily mean that you've got something good? Your objectives should be on your roadmap, so you can say at the end of the roadmap saying, if we did achieve this roadmap and everything went well, then you should be able to say that, yeah, we raised our revenue, or we decreased churn, or we improved usability. And those things realistically should help our overall business metrics, like, we've got more market share and, better everything else. And so you should be able to see how this stuff is tied back to important whys for the business, those objectives. And so often you see roadmaps that just don't have that. So oftentimes you can look at a roadmap and just see things that just stand out quite glaringly, that just point out to lack of autonomy, lack of alignment, lack of psychological safety.
Yeah, absolutely. Business value is what you're trying to tie it against, which is the reason for that. And as you're talking about, autonomy within teams, Danya, do strong roadmaps and OKRs actually allow autonomous teams, or would you say it restricts them?
No, it definitely does, because and it's especially true for senior management. So if you have created a strong roadmap and communicated the OKRs to middle management, say for example, there's something very important for one team, but I am not available. Like I work with security in infrastructure, customer success, product development, and data science teams. But there's something very important that takes all my attention on infrastructure side, and data science team wants to make a decision. If it always has to come to me, that's just not okay. So being able to make that decision would come from a strong roadmap. They know this is what the objective is that we're trying to achieve. So I'm trying to achieve the same objective. The mid-level management is trying to achieve the same objective. So in that same situation, we'd be able to make the same decisions, and the dependency would be less. And we're saying mid-level management, but these are very smart people, again, creative, and they know what needs to be done. They just need to have all the information they need to make these decisions, and we're just empowering them to make those decisions at the time by having a very strong alignment. Again, OKRs equals alignment, which would equates to autonomy back.
That could be very scary for some organizations, saying decisions are getting made further down the chain than nearer the top. But I completely agree. As long as the clarity is there for the team members that are able to make decisions of why decisions are being made, they should be able to make the same decisions as what upper management would make in those circumstances.
Maybe not all the decisions, but should be able to make the decisions that can be made. Say I have, like I said, I'm saying it again and again, we have worked without any OKRs in place. And there used to be times when we're integrating multiple works from different teams. Say, for example, it wouldn't just happen at all if I wasn't there in the room, or not in the room or on the call or something. Because, and that only happens because I had the big picture and I hadn't communicated that. And I used to wonder a lot of the times, why is it not known? And when it's so obvious, and it wasn't obvious only because it wasn't communicated or written down, or yeah. So once we do that, it's just that, and then it is obvious to everyone. So those decisions can be made.
Yeah.
Maybe some, not all the decisions, maybe as many decisions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Danny, you've got some really good points there. And the thing with decisions is that a lot of teams think about their decisions as irreversible when most decisions aren't, right? Most of the time you make a decision and it can be reversed, right? You've got this concept of one-way door versus two-way doors. And most decisions are two-way doors. Like you can make the decision, and if it's the wrong thing, you can go back on it. And in order to have that, generally speaking, you need a team who can work in an agile sort of way, as in you have processes where you can put something out there, and if it's not right, you're not in trouble for it, right? And you can roll things back. And that does require a little bit of tidiness within the way that you manage your processes and things like that. But once you have that, it means that people within your team can make decisions. You can move really quickly and get way more done than waiting for upper management to try to discover things for themselves and make the right decisions, which most of the time they're not, right? Because they're not close enough to the ground, and they're not seeing everything that the rest of the team is.
Yeah. And that coupled with psychological safety, like Janna said, like let's say things do go wrong with the decision. When we have flagged something's gone wrong, if this person has that safety to come up and say, oh, but I did this, maybe that's caused this to go wrong. Like when there is that safety, then we can just immediately act on it. As opposed to if they felt like, oh, I can't make this decision. And yeah.
Wonderful. So let's crack on with some of the client, some of the audience questions. If that's okay, because we've already got 13. It's piling up crazily. The one that's got the most votes so far, because obviously I assume a lot of people have this challenge. How do you address the challenge of when the roadmap is decided before the OKRs?
Ooh, all right. Well, there's a few things that are at play there, and I love bashing apart assumptions, right? So one is getting in there and figuring out like what's your role in there and who decided that, and figuring out why it was done that way, because a roadmap shouldn't be set in stone, right? Like what is that roadmap and what's it made up of? Because a roadmap should be a list of problems, right? And so if that roadmap is not a list of problems, and in fact it's a list of features, then figure out whose features they are and why they're so tied to them. Right now, some product managers would just sort of feel like they have to run ahead and go build this stuff. And that might be the best thing for your sanity if you are in a toxic workplace. But honestly, if you are in a safe enough space, I would start questioning the people around you, saying, who owns this roadmap? And how do I go about testing the assumptions that have been made on this roadmap? So why does this piece exist, and how do we tie this back to an objective? Because we don't know why this roadmap piece exists. We don't know why we're building it. Let's figure that out first, right? Sometimes it makes sense to just go and build the first thing that's on that roadmap, because sometimes it's work in progress. If you are a new product manager just joining that team, it can be really awkward to join a team and be like, well, you're halfway through a sprint there. But then look at it going, before we start building this next thing that you say needs to be built by the end of March or end of April or whatever, I'm just going to step back and question it and say, well, you said in January when you made this roadmap that you think this is the next most important thing to build, but let's just have some conversations, right? It's my first 90 days here. I'm just going to ask you and ask you and ask you and figure out what's most important here. And if it's not highlighted as the next most important thing to build, if it's not highlighted as the most important problem to solve, that'll come out of some of these questions, these interviews that you're having as the new product manager with fresh eyes. And you can start presenting back to them saying, well, here's the problems that I think we have, and it doesn't align with what you think this roadmap is. So whoever came up with this roadmap, wherever this roadmap came from, we need to throw that out. There's a thing that I like to call roadmap bankruptcy. And it's really freeing if you haven't tried it. It's this concept of just throwing out your old roadmap. It's great. What you do is you set your roadmap aside and just start fresh from a new one and just say, I'm just going to start with some questions and figure out what the new problems are. And then once I've got this new roadmap in place, I'm going to compare to the old one. And you might find, like by miracle, the new roadmap matches exactly the old roadmap, and the old roadmap was in fact perfect. Right, perfect. You've now validated that all those assumptions were the correct ones. Crack on, go do it. Chances are you will find out that a lot of the stuff on the old roadmap can be thrown out. It wasn't actually the right stuff. It was in the wrong order, or it didn't have a reason to be there, in which case you've just saved the team from building the wrong stuff. You're the hero of the day. So, by getting in there and asking some of the tough questions that oftentimes no one else had the guts to do or no one else knew how to do, you are actually preventing the team from wasting their time. And that's good work. It's tough work, though.
Yeah, I do know several CTOs that go down that approach of, okay, they've got 3 years worth of backlog tickets here. We're just deleting them all. If they're important, they'll come back. Mm-hmm. So that's a good way to clear out the workload. Daniel, have you got anything else to add?
Yeah, but it's also about, like, is your roadmap now achieving the key metrics that you wanted now? If it's not tied in at all, then like Janna said, just throw it out. Maybe if it is important, it will come back. But yeah, is your current roadmap, is it like, say for this quarter, you have one key metric, and is it achieving that? Like, maybe that's a good measure. And if it's not, there's no point. Like, even if you feel right now not confident around this roadmap being able to achieve this, like, is it time right now, instead of waiting for 2 months, to rethink that? And for us, the roadmaps change a lot. It's a competitive SaaS environment. Features, like, depending on the ask from the market, that features, even feature requests as well, not just technical depth and other stuff, change a lot and change on a daily basis. So we just rethink it all the time, and it's very hard to commit to a roadmap beyond 1 year period of time.
Absolutely.
And yeah.
Okay. And the next question, related to your comment, Janna, about space for learning, could you share an example of what a good roadmap looks like? Like, probably verbally, I assume, not directly sharing screen, but
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So one of the formats of roadmaps that I always advocate for is the now, next, later roadmap. So what this does, it does away with the concept of the timeline roadmap. And so the reason why the timeline roadmap really sets people up for failure is that it assumes that you've basically got a list of dates and a list of things to do, and everything else falls amongst that everything else sort of sits underneath that, and you have a due date associated for everything. Well, instead of having a timeline, we have time horizons. So now, next, and later. And that allows you to sort of give a more realistic view of the granularity of how much you actually know about things. So now are things that you have clear granularity over, right? The stuff that's keeping your team busy right now, you're doing discovery and research work into. Sometimes your dev team is, working on breaking down right now. The next is the stuff that's a little bit further onto the horizon, is coming up, are looming problems, but you're not breaking down right now. And then the later is the stuff that's on that further distanced horizon. It's like that mountain in the distance that you want to tackle, but you're not sure as to what sort of problems you're going to need to tackle as you get up there. And so typically speaking, the stuff that's in the later area, you're going to have to break apart later on. And so what you're basically doing is using it to sort of say the stuff that's in the now, we can give more granularity and more visibility into, what we know about it, how it's related to the work that we're doing, how we're progressing with it. The stuff that's in the later is much more formulated as, here's a problem that we think that we're heading towards. We're using this to give you alignment, to point out that we're all pointing in the same direction, but we're not going to try to tell you, when it's due, right? We don't have anything like that. And it's much more realistic than trying to say, this is going to be out December 2022. You don't know how big your team's going to be by December 2022, let alone how fast you're able to deliver. So stop trying to kid yourself. And the other key thing is that each of the things that are on your roadmap is connected back to an objective or two, right? You've got something saying each thing on your roadmap isn't a feature, it's a problem, and it's connected to a why. Like, why are you working on this, right? Is it there because you want to uplift your revenue? Is it there because you want to reduce churn? Is it there because you want to solve some problem for your business? What is it you're trying to do? So you should be able to squidge up your eyes and just sort of understand the key drivers for your business, the strategy for your business. If it's helpful, I can actually drop a link to some examples. We've got some live examples on our ProdPad sandbox that people can actually play with. I'll drop a link in the chat to that in a second.
Great. Wonderful. Okay, so while Janna's busy with that, so essentially, how do you define OKRs for engineering departments that relates to delivering specific products and functionality if the roadmap is liable to change through reprioritization led by the product department? Okay. So, yeah. So, I mean, my first thought about that is, should not the OKRs be defined first before the roadmap? But go ahead.
So OKRs, like objective for technology team or any team in the organization, are all aligned. It's the same objective, what the company wants to achieve. And maybe then we just translate it to a different words in the technology department saying, this is what this translates to. For example, I'll go back to the same example of if the organization's objective is customer acquisition by X number this year, then it's the same objective for tech team, but we just translate it to saying being able to onboard so much infrastructure wise, being able to process this much requests by the end of 2022. Like it's the same, but just worded differently for technology team. And sorry, what was that continuation? How do we define the key results?
So how do you define the OKRs for engineering departments?
Yeah. And then we define just the key results, not for like, because the engineering department could have multiple branches below and very well defined roles assigned between people. So you just define key results for everyone together and make it as specific as possible and as ambitious as possible while communicating that this is ambitious, but it'd be great if you could do it. Like I said, when that sense of excitement, everybody wants to hit the OKR, like it's good as far as we get, but it's okay if we don't. And that psychological safety of, no, that's too unrealistic, won't happen. They should have that. Okay, and then once that key result is for everyone, then you just break it down to what it means for individual teams. So, and then that's assigned to, like, each key results, a part of the key result metric is tied to different owners within the engineering team. So a part of it might come from backend team, infrastructure team, data science team, front-end team, like assign separate owners to these key results. So now everybody's aligned. They have the same metric. It's just that their role in that key metric is different. And so after all this is defined, and then comes roadmaps for us, like how to achieve this key result. Janna just said, don't mention time, but we do mention time. Like, how do we achieve this objective by this time and achieve that? Like, the roadmap's only there to achieve our key metrics to hit that objective. So, and it is the same across organizations. Say this key objective is the same for marketing team. They just define it differently where it makes sense to them, like this many inbounds, etc. So the objective is for the organization.
Yeah. And Danya, don't sweat it. Key results should be time bound. Whereas roadmaps shouldn't, because they're much more problem focused, and the key results should have time-bound boxes within them.
Sure. And should OKRs still be 50% achievable in your mind?
Oh, 50%. Oh, yeah. I go by 70, but I mean, it's the thing is the amount achievable is sort of made up. The way that I talk about OKRs and the amount that you're meant to achieve, it's all about whether you are pointing in the right direction or not, and not about how much you've achieved, right? So the whole goal is that you're basically saying, we want to go in that direction. Great. Well, you're basically telling the team, throw a goal that way. Great. So throwing a goal that way. And now for the rest of this quarter, run in that direction. And while you're going, try to do a whole bunch of things that will get you going in that direction. And as to whether they make it that far, doesn't actually matter, as long as they're all sort of running in that direction. Now, whether they threw it too far or too short doesn't really matter. All they're doing is actually creating the chart by which they'll measure themselves that quarter. As to whether it was the right throw is just an estimation game, and they didn't actually know what experiments they were going to run up front, what they were going to learn before they got there, which is why it's so important that OKRs aren't used as a stick, right? They're not used as a performance thing. You're not measuring their bonuses and their performance pay grades and things like that against it. It's literally just there to make sure that everyone's agreed that they've thrown in that direction. They're all going to be measuring themselves by the way that they've gone in that direction. So whether it's 50% or 70% or whatever, it's just the fact that you're creating a measurement yardstick by which you can say, yeah, we can measure that we went as far as here or as far as there, so that you can, see the progress against something.
And for the next question, so the question is, sometimes I've observed leaders struggling with this because of having to make quite specific solutions to shareholders, which then define what the business must do by when. Have you got any experiences of this?
I love this question. All right. So yes, I have lots of experiences with this. I've been in this business before. And unfortunately, sometimes you'll find that the business that you're in has fallen into what I call the agency trap. And it's an insidious one, right? Because you sometimes have to look at the business model that your company is falling under, and sense check it, and ask yourself, like, are we a product company or are we actually an agency? Now, sometimes it's okay to do a bit of custom work for developers, for clients, right? But really take a look at what it is that your team is being asked to do and why, and where these demands are coming from. Because ideally, as a product team, you should be given enough time to do discovery work, right? Your job is to discover the best problems to solve for the widest market, so that you can solve those problems and then become gain attraction with this huge market, and that's how you're going to get this huge lift off that you're hoping for. Now, if you are set onto delivery mode, as in you're basically told to sell the month of March to this client and sell the month of April to this next client, and every month is sold to a different client to build some custom little feature so you can close that deal, you're never going to have the time to get out there and discover big problems and solve those big problems, right? You're operating as an agency. Now, there's no shame in being an agency, right? Agencies make good money, and it's a great business model to have, but agencies don't scale, right? Agencies never do this, right? Agencies only ever scale based on the number of people who are in that business. And the real problem comes is that a lot of product companies who sell their time as agencies don't price as agencies. They do the work, sometimes even for free or almost for free, because they think that if they get that one next client, the next clients will just come in like this, and they never do. I've been in that business. I've had my time as a product manager, sold as a project manager to do these projects, and the business never came. That business shut down. And so I call it the agency trap, where you're sold on this short-term win, these little solutions to get the cash in hand, and the pressure is put on the product and development people to sell their time, but you never get the gains from it, because the stuff is essentially like you're taking the time that you could have been doing discovery for the wider world, and you've just taken on whatever discovery work that one salesperson has done for one client, and you just do that instead for the month. It's wasted time, and time is of the essence if you are a lean startup. That those months could have gone towards discovering bigger, better problems. So if you are in that position, take a close look at it and call it out. Say, are we meant to be working in discovery mode or delivery mode, right? What are we supposed to be doing with our time? Are we trying to be an agency, or are we trying to be a product company? Because if you want us to do this, we can't keep selling our time, because we're just only ever going to be like this at best. I've written an article on the agency trap. I've posted it on the ProdPad blog if you want to go take a look at that. That dives into what the symptoms of it are and how you can call it out and get out of it if anybody's interested in that.
Excellent. Yeah, I've definitely worked in agency mode like that inside a product business before as well. Daniel, do you have something else to add?
Yeah, the agency trap, like I do relate to that. Like, but then in very early stages, like when I was the only developer on the team, any customer that we talk to would feel important, and we used to feel like, should we build this, should we build that? But luckily, I'd say we didn't fall into agency trap. But even without that, Janna, it sometimes feature-wise, like some of the promises we would have to make. Say by next year we'd have these like there's features from the SaaS company perspective. So I'd say internally the product would still be, yeah, but I'd say it wouldn't be as tight as like as an agency. Like if you don't deliver, it's the end of the world. It's not like that. But it is better to have that. Isn't it better to have that idea that by the end of this year, maybe this would have been this much better, or like this whole new thing would be available?
Well, yeah, exactly. And the thing is, it's like at the early days, it feels like, I mean, it's a survival tactic in some cases,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Especially in the early days, right? Because you've only got sometimes one client who's talking to you, right? And sometimes they're absolutely right. They're like, look, I'll only buy this thing if you have this one feature. And you're like, yeah, well, we only have 2 features. So if we have 3 features, then yeah, we can realistically see how having that. And sometimes it works, right? Because you do that one piece of work for that one client, and then 3 more clients sign up. You're like, great, wonderful. But if you continue that thing, and a lot of companies continue this process of just building things that their clients keep asking for and selling their time, you end up in this feature delivery mindset. And adding more and more features for clients doesn't continue paying off. Eventually, sometimes removing features and saying no to clients, and just focusing on good usability and good onboarding and good services, and completely opposite stuff that worked in the early days ends up being the right stuff to work on. And so I always tell companies to think about if you're going to be taking on work for short-term cash wins, is it strategically important? Like, are you doing this to get that piece of cash in and to build that piece of functionality because you can see how it's a key piece of your strategy? Or are you just doing it because it's come along and it's a convenient piece of work and you couldn't think of other things to do with your developer's time? And oftentimes they take a step back and go, oh, right, maybe I should let the product and development team lead and really think about what we should be building, as opposed to just building what we were asked to do because we were asked to do it.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, well, we've still got lots more questions and not too much time, so let's see how we get through these. A roadmap can look a bit like a Gantt chart. How do you create a roadmap that is emergent, i.e. not waterfall plan for the year to come? How do you provide realistic estimates for initiatives that you may know very little about?
I have opinions on this. My take on it is that a roadmap shouldn't look like a Gantt chart, right? I recommend stepping away from the temptation to try to say that you've got this amount of time for this amount of thing for this thing, and this amount of time for this thing, and this amount of time for this thing, because what you're basically doing is you're making up dates, right? You don't know how long something is going to take. And by using a Gantt chart for a strategic planning document, you're penalizing yourself by spending time in planning mode that you don't need to, right? You should be sitting there in discovery mode and trying to discover what problems to solve and in what order, which is valuable time spent, but not trying to sit here saying, oh, well, that project took that long, so I'm just going to estimate that this project's going to take this long, and I'm going to add it on here, and then publish it and hope, because it never works. right? I have seen literally thousands of product roadmaps now, and most of them don't get delivered to any degree of what they look like at the beginning of the year. Most of them end up getting shifted based on what's happening in the market, and that's healthy, right? That means that the team is learning and delivering over the course of the year, as opposed to just saying, here's the plan and we're going to stick with it regardless of what happens out there.
Great.
Excellent. And actually touching on that, essentially the next question is roadmap a helpful term for this kind of flexible plan that is expected to change? Roads tend to be very fixed. Should we change the terminology?
I've debated that one. So when I first created ProdPad, one of the reasons I created it was because I was a product manager and I needed tools to do my own job, and I'd been creating artifacts out of Excel sheets and whatnot, and I'd been bitten by the bug. I wanted to create a web app out of it, and so we created the first version of ProdPad, which was a timeline roadmap. What we realized was that immediately people wanted this timeline roadmap. They wanted to be able to shift things over by a month after the first month or so. And we're like, oh, we could create like a multi-select tool and allow them to move everything over, but we asked the 5 whys. And that's when we realized that no one was delivering their timeline roadmap. Everyone actually wanted a flexible roadmap. And so we bashed apart this idea of the timeline roadmap and came up with the now, next, later concept, the 3-column concept. But we kept the title roadmap at the top. And I remember asking, me and my co-founder had this conversation saying, is it still a roadmap or is it something else? And we kept the title roadmap and just left it as is. And, I still debate as to whether it's the right thing or not. I like to think that we've disrupted the world of roadmaps by sort of coming in sideways with some like an alternative to roadmaps, like is oat milk still milk, but they still call it milk? Should it have like roadmap with a Y? I don't know. It's still solving the same core problem. It's still a strategic communication document. It's still there to get alignment, but it's doing it in a better, healthier way. Right? So I'd still call it a roadmap. It just looks different than what a lot of people thought roadmaps were 10 years ago. So as to whether you want to call it a roadmap or whether you want to call it a portfolio of options, or I've heard all different terms for it, whatever. Call it what you like. We call it a roadmap and we've stuck with it. I like to call it a lean roadmap. It works really well with OKRs. I think it's going to be a debate that goes on for a long time. It's whatever works for your team and whatever is consistent within your own terminology.
Cool. I think it's an opportunity for someone to get their name fixed into here and say, yeah, it's now called the Glinrod plan. And that means that it's dynamic and I'll get famous from that. So I might steal that. So essentially, one of the next questions is, how would you balance commercial goals versus problem spaces? How would you use commercial goals towards the top of the hierarchy? Would you hide them from teams or would you not use them at all? So I would say that the question is based around some transparency thing of how much information you go through. So yeah, how would you balance commercial goals versus problem spaces?
Commercial goals. Obviously, commercial goals are very, I would say, transparent to sales and marketing teams. With the engineering teams, I don't know how interesting it is, because most of the engineering team is made up of problem solvers, I think, and like problem solving in technological areas. That's what's driving. We do call out successes over and over again, saying this is what we did, this is how we are doing it. But again, like commercial goal could be translated to a different objective. Like I wouldn't, I would say within the engineering team, it's difficult to communicate. I have tried and failed a couple of times. Very initially, when it was like a 3-4 developer team we used to discuss it, it was quite hard to communicate how is the initial stage of the startup. You wouldn't have broke even. It's like revenue looks negative, but still your company is actually moving in a positive direction. Like some of the details would be quite hard to communicate and doesn't feel important to me, at least. You have to say, Janna.
Yeah, I mean, I err on the side of transparency with our commercial, our financial goals and metrics within ProdPad. I've often been asked the question as to whether, you know, people are aiming for, whether teams should be aiming for user outcomes or business outcomes. And fundamentally, you're aiming for business outcomes. But I mean, any smart business owner would know that your user outcomes should be aligned with your business outcomes, because if your user outcomes aren't aligned, then your users are going to bugger off, right? And so you should be finding ways to say, well, if our business outcomes need to be these, right, our commercial goals are these, then these are the outcomes that we need in order to meet those. And oftentimes they are formulated in the way of user outcomes, and sometimes they're formulated in the ways of talking about strict business outcomes. But the team should understand as to what they're doing is going to impact the business. Otherwise, they're kidding themselves, right? They should know that they're working for if it's a for-profit business, and they should know that they're working for a for-profit business, and how what they're working on is going to impact those different metrics, and that they're doing things in order to get users to join, to use and love the app or the product or whatever, to get engagement or whatever sort of metrics they're doing, because that drives revenue for the business, and that's healthy, and that pays all the bills and everything else. So it should all be aligned, and they should see how that all plays together and how that actually helps the whole business as a whole.
Yeah, when I was a developer first starting, I really wanted to have more transparency of this. It's always interesting to know how the organization is doing in these areas. Sorry, Danya.
Sorry, my question would be like, would you like to know like number of customers, like how customers join, what the goals there is, like that commercial goal I understand, but if it goes down details to cash flow level, like would you share that kind of information with the rest of the organization?
Yeah, we share that level of detail. I mean, our team has access to our chart mogul, which has all of our financial data.
I know some organizations are very concerned about sharing their run rate, for example. It's like, oh, you've only got 6 months until you're broke. And obviously that sounds very scary to a normal developer, but for a C-level, it's like, well, this is expected. We're going through a raise process. It's going to be fine. So yeah, it probably depends on your situation as well as also the education of the team of whether they can actually understand what it actually means.
You know what? Your developers are probably smarter than you. Like, if they can understand what's going on in the back end, they can understand how the finances of the business are working, right? So if you can explain why a run rate of 6 months is actually okay because you've got this process in place, you can explain that to them. They're humans. Don't kid them. Don't bury your head or their heads, right? Talk to them, and they can help you if there's something that you need their help with.
All right, I'm moving on to the next question then. So we've got, less than 10 minutes now. This is an important one. This is a very important one, I think. How do you keep momentum going past the initial, hey, we're doing OKRs, and then actually make sure they keep happening and work effectively?
Retros and just continuous learning and having an OKR champion. So we have an OKR champion within our team, somebody who is basically owns the process. For us, it's our chief of staff. So somebody who works directly with me who basically works with the different team leads to set them up every quarter to say, remember that we've got this OKR planning session, remember that we've got this OKR retro session, remember that we've got to do this check-in session, and make sure that we're actually doing the work behind it, making sure that OKRs are being reported on. We've got monthly team-wide little short team meetings where we just share how far we're actually getting with our OKRs. So it just becomes part of our daily processes. And they're part of the roadmaps. They're part of our daily vocabulary, right? Anybody in the team should be able to easily find the OKRs and talk about them as part of why they're working on anything.
Great. And Daniel, what are your thoughts on quantitative key results?
Sorry?
What are your thoughts on quantitative key results?
Yeah, key results for us, again, it's not very strict, as long as we are achieving about 70% of the key results. Again, like we assign key results to different owners and then create the roadmap to match that. Sorry, for me, others is frozen on my screen. I don't know if you can still hear me.
Yeah, we can still hear you fine.
Okay, yeah, sorry. Yeah. So within our organization, we assign key results specific to different owners, and then we kind of measure, again, it's not a measure on the performance. We measure that month by month to make sure will we hit it by this quarter, and then depending on that, again, we change the product roadmap to hit that key results. Because sometimes, especially with research, if we have a deadline on it saying we'll reach, we'll be able to do this by this month, that may not happen, especially with research, and also resourcing. Say if we had decided we'll hire this person and then be able to have a specific number, say be able to process 10,000 of some data in 1 week, by this month, but we don't have the resource to do it, so we'll source it and do it. Like those things, again, like it's flexible, but at the same time we should be able to hit those numbers.
Wonderful. Okay, then. So we've probably got time for just one last question. I'm just thinking which last question to put in. Okay, so this is probably an interesting one. How do I persuade my CEO that a roadmap without dates on it is the way to actually go? And my thing just moved it up. I said, it's actually the way to go. He wants to know exactly when the things will be ready. How do you actually deal with the CTO in this manner?
Yes, I love this one. Right. So I've actually written a guide that talks about the different objections that you might have to handle. It's like an objection handling guide for product managers. But it's always, there's different angles that you might need to tackle. So one might be, figuring out why they're actually trying to get that level of clarity, right? So if it's CTO, what are they trying to understand there? Is it because they think that it's going to make you move faster? Is it that sense of control? Is it a misunderstanding as to how projects work? So you might need to come back to them with case studies and indications, proof that teams don't actually work more effectively or faster or solve better problems by working in a very constrained and time-driven way. If it's the CTO, point out how much tech debt they're probably racking up by having you stack up one project after the other without necessarily having room to go back and do that rework, right? Timeline-driven roadmaps are generally riddled with tech debt. So you can probably point out how much risk that they're incurring by working in this way. Sometimes you end up with, they've got pressures from other people in the team, like they're hearing it from the CMO who's saying, hey, look, I need to know when my work can begin so that you can work on, so I can work on my thing, right? So they're hearing the pressure and therefore they're putting the pressure on the product team. Well, in those cases, you need to work with the marketing side or the sales side or whoever's putting the pressure on them to help separate things like your hard launch from your soft launch, because a hard launch is the big bang, tell the whole world about it. But a soft launch is putting it out in like a beta format, behind a feature flag. And if you separate the two, then you release the pressure from having to have a date on it. You can say, let's put this out when it's convenient for us as a development team, right? This is our project and this is your project. You can begin your project planning as soon as we're done ours. And, if it takes 6 days or 6 hours or 6 weeks or 6 months to do your project planning, then that's fine. You're no longer having to tie your project planning really stressfully to my project planning, which is where that problem comes in. So if you can figure out what that stress is, right? Is it because they're misunderstanding how it is you work? Is it because they've got pressures coming in from somebody else? Figure out what that objection is and then work on handling that objection. I'll drop that objection handling list in the chat as well and see if that helps anybody.
And Danya, do you want anything else you want to summarize with?
Yeah, I do agree with Janna saying like some of the things about tech debt, because let's not say that we finish a project, we don't do everything in it. There was a priority list and there was a list of things. So immediately starting another project straight away, bound by time, does rack up tech debt. And she's spot on other people putting the pressure as well with because you know some things have to be just done by others, and then it's just but yeah, like I said again, like there could be priorities of how much you can do, and also combined with psychological safety. And when the rest of the team is able to say, like, see the roadmap and call out things, maybe we could bring everybody on board with this is how much can be done by this time. So if we want to have it all, like, we need to provide buffer time. So there is this concept of always plan for 70% capacity of the team. Like, that's one thing that we do. So if it's always planned for 70%, because let's say even roadmaps are not like with what's going on. You're working on a particular roadmap, and then suddenly comes in something that's become so important that it's taken priority over everything else. Like, these things can happen. So always plan for 70% capacity maybe on anything. That would yeah, reduce the pressure on everyone.
Brilliant. Well, thank you both for being here today. So it's been amazing talking to you. You've been excellent and obviously very easy to moderate. You can connect with our speakers after the event on the links that I've just shared a bit before. So if you scroll up the chat, you'll see the links there. Thank you all for joining today. Don't forget, next Thursday, so Thursday, not Friday, at 2:00 UK time, there'll be another CTO Craft Bytes event called on how to turn your engineering team from good to great. I think I'm moderating that one as well. So you'll see me again. So yeah, thank you all for joining, and thanks again to our speakers for joining today.
Hey, thanks so much for having us.
Everyone.
Thanks
All
a lot.
right, take care.
Bye.
Bye.